Here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the New Jersey Film Festival Spring 2023 Filmmaker Interview Series. We'll be doing a number of these to promote the screenings that will be taking place at our festival. Our festival will be running virtually and in person from January 27th through February 19th. There'll be over 10 programs featuring films from all over the world. We'll also be including the United States Super 8 Film and Digital Video Festival as part of the New Jersey Film Festival, a smaller festival that is part of the Spring 2023 NJFF. And today we have André Silva here. He's going to be talking about his wonderful film, Revelation to the Disembodied. And André is an alumnus of our festival. We showed his first film almost a decade ago, I think. Is that correct, André?
Yeah, that's about right. It's been a while.
Yeah, and we're going to be screening his animation film, and it'll be playing on February 10th at 7 p.m. in person at Voorhees Hall, room 105. On the Rutgers University campus at 71 Hamilton Street in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And if you can't come to the in-person screening, it will be available video on demand for 24 hours on that day. So if you start watching it, let's say at 10:45 on the 10th, you still have 24 hours to finish watching it. So it's a really great deal. I'll show you how to buy tickets and stuff towards the end of our Q&A, but I wanted to talk to André about this film. Tell us a little bit about how you decided to make this film, André.
So this is the second film in a trilogy, and it's animation, experimental, and first I started the first film in the trilogy back in 2013. So these are not things that are easy to crank out. Animation's a very slow going process. But I would say I have these kind of two seemingly contradictory interests, which is, I have a lot of interest in sort of the environment and what we would call the natural world, what we think of as the natural world, but also technology and looking at, there's actually, I feel like, a lot of commonalities between sort of natural patterns and what's happening with with the internet or with things that happen online. And in fact, if you look at like a map of the internet, it looks a lot like a mycelial kind of or rhizomatic growth. And so that kind of has made me think, or has kind of started me sort of a speculation of this idea of like, how much of this natural patterning are we taking into the digital environment? And then what does that mean in terms of, is there really a difference between what we consider sort of like, civilization or development or this kind of thing, and, what sort of the forested areas or sort of the undeveloped areas? Is there really a difference, or are we just sort of a new iteration of that development? And so both of these films in the trilogy play with this idea. So I also have an interest in sort of mythology, but mythology is a program, is a cultural program. And so both films in the trilogy, and the first one was Cybergenesis, which is now available online for public viewing, and then now this one, Revelation to the Disembodied, look at sort of the Judeo-Christian Genesis myth, but actually it looks at a different interpretation of that myth, which is the Gnostic interpretation, which is quite different. And I won't go down that rabbit hole necessarily, but just to say, it's an interpretation of the myth that fits more smoothly, I feel, with looking at us as sort of like a creator god of sorts, and the technology and the bits and pieces that we create in this sort of cyber universe is sort of like the world that we are creating. And so, like many mythologies, you don't have a mythology, at least as far as I'm aware, that just sort of develops from scratch. Even in our cultural history, mythologies and traditions and this kind of thing borrow bits and pieces from other traditions.
Mm.
And so, likewise, this film and the film before it and the trilogy imagine a creation myth. So it's a creation myth that's developed by an emergent, or what we might think of as artificial intelligence,
Mm.
trying to understand its origin story. And so it borrows from bits and pieces of humanity's online legacy to develop that mythology.
I mean, when I watched your film, I thought of I mean, the biblical line is clear. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of flashed to Ridley Scott's Prometheus
Mm-hmm.
for some reason because of, the human species being some kind of developed from some alien force,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking of your film somewhat along those lines. But I also like the kind of merging of the organic and the digital, because that's something that also you see. But the animation itself is a computer generated animation. Is that correct? Or
That's
it's
correct.
not a cell animation, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And one thing that I really tried with this film that it took quite a while,
Mm.
but a lot of the images, yeah, were I created everything in After Effects, but then I exported the images and then processed them through like a deep dream generator.
Mm.
So it's almost like which is sort of machine learning AI, and people might be familiar with this sort of advent of this sort of I think Google used to have a deep dream program, maybe still does, and people might be familiar with like these photographic images that were processed by the machine learning program, and then
Mm.
it's just the whole thing is made of like dogs and weird
Right,
reptiles, and
right.
and so the program that I used to process a lot of the frames from the initial animation were
Mm.
sent through a program similar to this, and the result was more subtle. But again, it's this idea of sort of an artificial intelligence reinterpreting a human creation. And so that kind of adds that technical, sort of the technical accentuates the sort of conceptual in that regard.
Yeah, maybe since we're talking about it, let's give our audience a little bit of a taste of what your film looks like. And so just a few seconds worth. Let's see if I can get the sound on here too. Okay, let me just turn it off a second. So that was to give folks a little bit of a taste. That's towards the beginning of your film,
Mhm.
and there are three sections. I mean,
Mhm.
there's three intertitles that divide the film into three parts. Do you want to talk about why you divvied it up that way?
Sure, yeah. So the titles of the three parts is the first one is that we saw a piece from. It's called "The Language They Created Invaded Them."
Mm.
And just a blurb about that. It does start with like the first word of that is listen. So it's just about this sort of non-corruption of just listening to everything, to the
Mm.
environment, to this kind of thing. And slowly, from listen, that splits into words. The whole thing, and it was really hard to convey this, but the whole thing is supposed to be, for that first section, um, a sentence or a thought encoded in a tree. So actually what you're doing is you're looking at cross sections of the tree. So we start out with the trunk, and then we kind of come up, and then the trunk splits into the two boughs, and every time there's a fracture, there's a word associated with the branch that comes off. And like I said, it's, we start with words, and then, or listen, and then listen words, and then there's sort of a misleading sentence where it's like this idea of Eve, the sort of force of Eve creating the narrator, but then really, no, it's not Eve. It's when they created me out of the earth along with your mother Eve.
Right.
So sort of a correction of a thought as things get more and more complex. So that's why the title of that subsection, the language they created invaded them. And that's kind of a reflection on so much of like whatever language, whatever is the dominant language of the culture that you live in is going to inform how you think.
Right.
So we hear about cultures where they don't have any word, or they don't have any word for the word I or my. Well, what does that do to a person's psychology if there's no sort of personal identifier?
Yeah.
So, and then that's the first section. And then second one is the luminous object at the end of time. And the idea with that is like, what if we looked at sort of an origin story rather than something that sort of a big bang or something, or like this origin point? What if we, looked at it as that there's something actually in the future that's pulling us toward it that actually has projected, our entire existence already, and then the third section is titled The Apocalypse of Adam. And that actually comes from, I won't go down the Gnostic rabbit hole. And if people aren't familiar with the Gnostics, you can think of a movie like The Matrix, the original Matrix movie. And that's kind of like a modern day Gnostic myth. And actually, I have a website, andresilvaspace.com, and I have a blog called The Liminal Space, and it kind of goes down, does a deep dive of the Gnostic interpretation of Genesis as it relates to this film. So the third section is the Apocalypse of Adam, and it's actually there are many different books of the Gnostic text that interpret the sort of this creation myth or reinterpret it. And so that title is actually the title of one of the books. And it's, the gist of it is that, in the Orthodox version, we hear about like Adam goes into a sleep, God removes a rib and makes Eve. But in this Gnostic version, we actually have it. I mean, first of all, the Gnostics kind of don't interpret anything literally. So Adam, Eve, God, the serpent, they're all meant to represent different aspects of the human psyche, and evolution and development. But anyway, Adam goes into this dream, and there's sort of this mystical Eve that awakens him and tells Adam that really the world that he's in is kind of a material prison. This isn't like the true world, and there's actually, there are realms that are above this world, and that that he has this sort of life force or something that's superior to the God that created him, so the God of sort of the material world. And I like, again, all of this is I'm using all of this is sort of like parallel to maybe what if we created sort of, what if humanity created an artificial intelligence or a sentient artificial intelligence? And I think from the discourse that's out there, so much of it actually is about like, well, what if what if humans created sort of a sentient artificial intelligence? But I became interested in this idea of like, well, what if we created the container? So in this Gnostic Genesis, the God figure creates the container of Adam, but Adam is a sort of lifeless like meat suit in an equally dead world. And it's actually this Eve who visits him in a dream that sort of breathes life into Adam. So, likewise, I wonder, well, what if, what if there's this, and of course, all this is speculative fiction. Like, I'm not saying this is the way it is, of course, but it's interesting to think about, well, what if we did create sort of an emergent intelligence that was lifeless in many ways, but what if some other life force or form um, was able to enter that container that we create, sort of the container of the technological, artificial intelligence. And it's that idea of, like, to bring up the phrase life finds a way, right? So, the way that flowers and grass come up through the cracks in the sidewalk, you know, uh, life is weird. And what if some life form entered the sentient AI, or not the sentient AI, but sort of the components of the artificial intelligence through the container of the artificial intelligence, and then became sentient, if that makes sense.
That's why Stanley Kubrick's 2001
Hmm.
is such a kind of seminal film.
Hmm.
50 years ago, plus already thinking in all along those lines with Hal,
Hmm.
being that AI that becomes aware.
Hmm.
And I think that your film, is so beautiful to watch. I think when viewers will see Andre's film, they'll say similar things to what our jury said. I wrote down some of their comments, and it scored so high that I was able to tell Andre way in ahead of time that we were going to show his film, because when a film scores out of 10, 10 being the best, eights and nines, it's going to show. So that that's what was the case for your film. And this judge wrote, this film was incredibly unique. The animation was stunning, as it was filled with beautiful abstract imagery, very psychedelic. Another person wrote, the stunning visuals feel almost hypnotizing, especially in tandem with the voiceover and sound. The film had an interesting, almost ominous sense of calm. The interaction between nature and technology is very compelling, while effectively conveying their story in a mesmerizing manner without feeling disconnected. I mean, there's so many others. We usually have 5 judges watch a film, and all of them scored it very high. And so you should be very proud. I'd
That's
like
great
to
to
take
hear.
this time now to share screen again and have our audience kind of see how they can purchase tickets and stuff like that. Normally, our, our, our patrons would go to njfilmfest.com. That's our website. And you would get the welcome page, this is the backdrop is a photograph of the screening space for Voorhees Hall. But you can scroll down or hit current events. And we have the artwork that's on my t-shirt, which is the art for the festival. And this is just basic general information: when the festival is taking place, where. Tickets are $15 per program. And that means that you can watch it online and in person. And we had a number of people do that in our previous hybrid festivals. So they would watch the film in the morning or the afternoon, and then they would come and see it on our big screen with a live audience. And then many of the times, many of the filmmakers are going to be there too and do a Q&A with the audience. So that $15 buys you both access to both of those. You can also buy a festival pass for $100. That lets you see all of the programs. And you basically it's like seeing the film programs at half price, just about. And we're doing something different too. For the in-person screenings, students get to see the films for $10. Since we're very conscious of the high prices of everything these days, that we wanted to fight that by making the in-person programs a little bit cheaper. But you want more information, and to purchase tickets, you've got to click this red button, which sends you to our Eventive website, which serves as both a place to see online and to also purchase tickets for the in-person shows. And so you've got a variety of means to find the programs that we're going to be offering. And so the February 10th program is the one that features your film. And you would click on that, and you can scroll down and find Revelation to the Disembodied with another picture. And you can click the pre-order button, and that gives you access to all of these great films that are being shown on that evening. You can also go back to the festival site, and this is our welcome page, and there's a film guide, that has all the films that we're showing, and there's, a placeholder for each movie with basic information, cast and crew. And then you can also go back on the menu to the welcome page and hit schedule, which gives you a very kind of linear view of all the films with big pictures and descriptions. And you can get information about each one of the movies that way. So I hope folks will come to this program. It's really a special program. We've got, let's see, how many films are we showing? About 45 films that we're screening. And Andre's film for the New Jersey Film Festival component was one of 27 films that we selected from 678 movies. And so we're only showing 3% of what was sent for the NJFF. And that's on par with a program or a festival like Sundance or some of the other festivals that are out there that are pretty large. We're not as big as them, but we are very picky about what we show. And so it's really important for us to, get folks out to support independent films. And I want to say thank you to André Silva from Wilmington, North Carolina, right? That's where you're from.
Exactly.
For joining us for this Q&A. And I hope folks will come and check out his magical work. It's really quite special.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, André. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. Thank you. You too.